For decades, Singapore property has had this reputation as one of the safest investments on the planet, a real safe haven. But if you actually try to buy something, or even just move from one place to another, it can feel more like a fortress. So what's the real story here? Is it a haven protecting its people's wealth? Or is it more of a gilded cage, trapping capital and killing opportunity? All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tackling the Singapore property conundrum, specifically the government's incredibly calculated grip on the market. And they do this through a whole bunch of policies known as cooling measures. But this isn't just about economics, not really. It's a fascinating story of deliberate, high-stakes market design. And this quote just nails it. It really sets the stage for everything we're about to discuss. What started out as these really blunt, broad-stroke moves to stop a market crash has evolved into something way more precise. We're talking about a level of micromanagement, a set of scalpels, not a sledgehammer, that shapes exactly who can buy, what they can buy, and even how much they can borrow, all to achieve some very specific social outcomes. So, how in the world does this engineering actually work? Well, to understand that, we gotta look at the tools they use, the government's ever-evolving toolkit. And it's a pretty fascinating look at how policy has had to adapt and get smarter over time to keep a lid on one of the world's hottest property markets. And make no mistake, this is not a new thing. The government has been playing this game for nearly 30 years. But look at how things have escalated. It all started pretty simply back in '96, with a capital gains tax to stop flipping. Then, after the global financial crisis, things got more serious. The big one, the game changer, was in 2011 with the additional buyer's stamp duty, or ABSD. Then came the TDSR in 2013, which put a cap on your total debt. And just recently, in 2023, wow, a massive 60% tax for foreigners. A clear shot across the back. So, if you boil it all down, the modern toolkit really has four main levers of control. First, they tax demand. They make it expensive and painful to flip properties or own a bunch of them. Second, they control your access to credit, making sure nobody gets in over their head. Third, and this is so important, they manage the supply side, not just releasing land, but by building an enormous amount of public housing. And finally, they get really specific, shaping behavior with little rules designed to cool off certain hotspots in the market. So all of this, it leads to this huge debate, right? You've got two completely different ways of looking at it. On one side, people say, this is fair regulation. It's necessary to prevent a crash and keep homes affordable. But the other side says, no way, this is a market stifler. You're choking the life of the market and hurting everyone. So which one is it? Let's dig into both arguments. Okay, let's start with the official story, the government's rationale. This is the fair regulation argument. The whole idea here is to engineer stability, to prevent one of those devastating boom and bust cycles, while also defending this core promise that every Singaporean should be able to afford a home. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Amidst all the headlines about these huge taxes, what's the additional buyer's stamp duty for a Singaporean citizen buying their first home? It's zero. Zilch. Nothing. And that one number tells you almost everything you need to know. It shows you how surgical these policies are. The target isn't the average person trying to buy a home. It's squarely aimed at investors, multiple property owners, and foreign buyers. And here's the direct result of that strategy. What you're looking at is a deliberately created two-tier market. Look at the public housing, the HDB flats, where 80% of the population lives. The price-to-income ratio there is considered attainable, totally reasonable. Now look at the private condo market. By the exact same international standards, it's rated severely unaffordable. This proves the policy has been incredibly successful at its main goal, keeping public housing affordable by walling it off from the wild private market. Okay, but let's flip the coin. It's not all smooth sailing. There's a powerful counterargument that says these same measures are a market stifler, that they're suffocating the kind of dynamism a healthy economy needs, and, well, creating a whole new set of problems. So let's look at the hidden costs of all this control. And right here, this is the poster child for the market stifler argument. 60%. Just think about that for a second. a 60% tax on any foreigner who wants to buy a home. I mean, that's not a cooling measure anymore, that's a deep freeze. It's sending a signal loud and clear that certain types of investment money are just not welcome. And oh boy, has it had an impact. Just look at these numbers. They don't lie. A staggering 71% plunge in condo purchases by foreigners right after that tax hike. Transaction volume, which is like the lifeblood of a healthy market, it was just decimated. This is exactly what critics mean by stifling. The liquidity, the activity, it just vanished almost overnight. Okay, but wait a minute. This is where it gets kind of weird. If you're choking off demand like that, and transaction volumes have fallen off a cliff, then why in the world aren't prices crashing? It's the central paradox of this whole thing, and the answer tells you something really unique about the psychology of the Singapore market. Well, the answer is that all these rules have accidentally created what you could call a hodl market. Yeah, HODL. It's a crypto term. It means hold on for dear life. And it fits perfectly. Think about it. The high taxes to buy in and the high taxes to sell and get out mean that nobody wants to move. At the same time, because the loan rules are so strict, almost nobody is forced to sell. So what do you get? A market with very little action, but where prices just refuse to budge. They stay stubbornly high. And of course, when you squeeze a balloon in one spot, it has to bulge out somewhere else. All that pressure had to go somewhere. And the biggest unintended consequence has been a massive surge in the rental market. I mean, if it's too hard to buy, what do? You rent. In 2022 alone, private home rents shot up by nearly 30%. A new affordability crisis was born, this time for tenants. All right, so let's pull all these threads together. We've heard both sides of the story. Where does this actually leave us? Let's try to make sense of this policy dance and figure out what the big takeaway is. Look, the truth is, this isn't a simple case of regulation is right and stifling is wrong. Both arguments are valid because they're describing two sides of the same coin. What we're really seeing is a very conscious, very deliberate trade-off. The government has looked at its options and has consistently chosen long-term stability and safety over the ideals of a dynamic, freewheeling market. And when you zoom out and look at the global picture, you really see just how unique Singapore's approach is. It's in a league of its own. Look at that homeownership rate, nearly 90%. That's the direct result of the state controlling both the supply of housing and the rules of demand. Other places, like Hong Kong or Vancouver, can try to copy the taxes, but they can't replicate the fundamental state-led structure that gives Singapore this incredible level of control. So let's break this down. What does all this actually mean for you? 3 key things. 1, if you're a first-time homebuyer, the system is fundamentally on your side. But, and this is a big but, that support is laser-focused on public HDB housing. 2, if you're an investor, the message is crystal clear. The barriers to entry are sky-high on purpose. This is not the place for short-term speculative flips. And 3, for anyone just watching this market, the number 1 lesson is this. This is a managed ecosystem, not a free market. Never, ever underestimate the government's willingness to step in. Which brings us back to that one final big question. Singapore has definitely achieved a level of housing stability that is the absolute envy of the world. But, as we've seen, that stability doesn't come for free. It comes at a real cost to market freedom, to liquidity, to the traditional ways of creating wealth, and it forces us to ask, is the price of all that stability worth it?